I'm speaking tonight as the father of an ex-inmate, former inmate. But of course, Zachariah is much more than that. He came to us as an infant through CPS. And that was 22 years ago. Zachariah's birth mother gave him his name, Zachariah, which has the meaning Jehovah remembers. My wife, Laura, and I welcome Zachariah as a 3-day-old, and with open arms and open heart. As Zach grew, he displayed some remarkable, if not a little quirky, traits, some remarkable gifts. Particularly in the area of music, he turned everyday kind of item into a musical instrument. He's done that to water bottles and various other things. And so he has this innate kind of ability. And he's taken that in some different directions. And so today, he is, I would call, an accomplished or expert yodeler. And he's a pretty fair bagpipe player as well. In fact, I have his bagpipes in my car. I intended to give to him tonight. He wasn't able to be here tonight. All right. After completing high school, he did embark in the area of the culinary arts, but he had that was interrupted, and for the past couple of years, he became an inmate at the Collin County Detention Facility, and so he then has learned what it's like to live the life of an inmate, the degradation, the humiliation, dehumanization that represents. About 6 months ago, we were able to have Zach come out. He was released, and a little bit about that process. We were tasked, my wife and I were tasked with the task of finding a place for Zachariah to live as a condition of his release. We were getting pretty anxious because we knew that eventually the end of that allotted time would come, and he may be, given over to TDC to be someplace else, not under his control or our control. And so we were under the gun, but we were looking for months for a place. Being really frustrated, spending a lot of time and emotional energy. But about the time that we were at the end of our rope, really, Jehovah remembered. We received a recommendation for us to examine Hope Prison Ministries. Talk about a beacon of hope. The heaviness that we felt was lifted as we talked with Chandler. He was someone who could understand Zach's situation and was willing to take a risk. Chandler acted, and within a few days, there was a place for Zach. With an elated and grateful heart, I picked Zach up from the detention facility and drove him to his new home at the Belzé's house. There he was greeted warmly by Chandler and the house manager, Brian McKinley. For the first time in many months, Zach had a warm and comfortable bed to sleep in. Chandler, Brian, and the other men embraced him. They were all in this together. They had each other's backs in a good way. Zach relaxed. He began returning to his quirky, funny self. Very quickly, the staff helped Zach establish a healthy routine. In short order, they helped him land a job. He became known as the Old South German Pancake House yodeling busboy. With daily accountability, Zach does more of the right things when they should be done. Something I neglected to mention earlier, Zach happens to fall on the autism spectrum. So he has some additional difficulties when it comes to being able to relate effectively, appropriately in different environments. And so that was an added factor when it came to finding a place for Zach. Very significant. Does this description I've provided of how wonderful things have been for Zach since he's been at Hope Ministries, does it mean it's all roses for him? No. Let's face it, life is hard. And like any of us, Zach sometimes goes off the rails. However, in Chandler and the house staff, Zach's failures have not resulted in his being kicked to the curb as they would otherwise be. They have a resilient hope for him, for the future that they see in him. They love Zach. Zach has stretched them in ways that the ministry hasn't dealt with before. In some ways, Zach is providing a way for the ministry to plow new ground. That resilience, perseverance, and forward thinking on the part of Chandler and the rest of the team is making a difference in Zach's life. As a dad, I'm thankful that Zach has such an advocate. And Jehovah remembers.
So Zach's charge makes it extremely difficult to find him a place to live, as is true for most of the men that come to us, with few exceptions. But when you add to that mental health issues and the autism spectrum that he was talking about, it's impossible. I recently appealed to another ministry that I felt like was better suited, and they declined. So when I tell you we're it, I mean we're it. A few years ago, we had another young man come to us with special needs. And the church we were in at the time said, we should find a place better suited for this young man. And my son quipped, don't worry, Dad. After all the research, they'll come back to you and say, we found a place. It's 1808 Spicewood Trail, which was our home at the time. Because we were the only ones. That's what it is to be a city of refuge. Let me explain something. The state's job is not to be the arm of charity and benevolence. That's the role of the church. That's the role of Christians. I had another young man call me once. He was an atheist. He said, I don't understand why I have to be a Christian to get your help. I said, you don't. Just go ask your atheist buddies. Oh, wait. They don't do this, do they? You can't find an atheist transitional house. What you can find are different people trying to do good that may not have faith as the root. But the reality is, it's Christians that do this. D. James Kennedy wrote a book, What If Jesus Had Never Been Born? And he traces all the things that came from that. It's the church's responsibility. In the Old Testament, when a man was on the run for manslaughter and he had nowhere to go, he was to go to the city of refuge. Guess who ran the city of Refuge. It was the priests. It was the church. That's what we're called to be. If God would provide us the funding, I can promise you, I wouldn't build a bigger house or a bigger barn to store my belongings in, like so many ministers you see on TV today. We would build cities of refuge all across this country where we could take people in that nobody else would take. And we would help them learn what it means to live in a Christ-centered community of faith. And we would help them get their GED if they needed it. We'd help them go to college. We'd help them learn the gospel. That's what it's all about. That's why we're here.